All right. Let's talk a little bit about the first executives here with our new nation. This is number 1 here. All right. Some of the things that happened earlier on under the new Constitution included things like the Judiciary Act, of 1789. What this does is it creates a Supreme Court and federal and district courts. And what does this have to do with the executive, John asks? Well, the president, the executive department, is responsible for assigning those positions. Okay. Another early executive decision here was the cabinet, early cabinet. This was created by Washington. This was not in the Constitution. The Constitution didn't call for a cabinet necessarily, but it did leave room for one to be created, and so we have Washington create a cabinet that includes, let's see, we have Jefferson, who is the Secretary of State. Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury. Henry Knox is the Secretary of War. And Hamilton's plan for government here, let's talk about Mr. Alexander Hamilton, the old Federalist himself. Hamilton's plan. Once young Alexander Hamilton gets appointed to this cabinet position, he decides that if the government benefits the wealthy, they'll invest in the government. That's what his kind of concept is, all right? So Hamilton believes if the government benefits the wealthy, they'll invest in the government. And so what Hamilton did was he assumed all state debts from a federal level, all right? So he took all the state debts and he said, we'll pay them off federally. Again, getting people to understand that, well, the government can benefit what do you say? The government can benefit the wealthy. So by assuming all the state debts, this upsets some of the southern states, right? Your book talks about that because the northerners had more debt because of the war and everything else that had been going on. And so the reason why this upsets the South is because they don't want to share. If I don't have a lot of debt, I don't want to have to share the debts that every other state has and be part of that. Because if I'm Massachusetts and I have 25% of the overall debt in the United States, I'm okay with sharing the debt because now I have to pay 1/13 of the total debt rather than 25% of the total debt for the entire nation. Does that make sense? Virginia had already paid off all their debt, so what did they get in return for this? What did the South get as a trade-off? They got the capital. They got Washington, D.C.
Has there ever been a point in our history that America hasn't been in debt?
I'm sure there has been. I can't think of it right now. I mean, as far as like, where we have a surplus, where we have a national surplus, yeah, I believe. Yeah, John?
When they moved the capital, did they name it Washington, D.C.? was just a district of Columbia, and then later on they renamed it.
I think, yeah, I think it's just, yeah, because they don't name it after Washington. In fact, I was reading in this book that the United States actually had a policy that lasted up until the state of Washington's admittance to the Union, that they didn't name a state after an individual or historical figure. That makes sense. All right. All right. So one of the reasons why Hamilton wants to assume the debt is because he sees debt as a good thing. The more debt that people, the more that people are owed from the government, the more of a stake that they have in the success of a government. If I owe Lyndon Young $20,000 and I'm opening up a new business and Lyndon has given me this generous $20,000 loan, you think Lyndon's going to have more of an interest in that business's success as opposed to if I just opened up a business and he was walking by and said, "Oh, Mr. Rush has opened up a business."
You might stop and be like, "What's up? How's it going?"
Well, he's probably gonna want to stop in if he has $20,000 in there because he has some stake in the game. All right, I owe him money, right? And so if I go belly up, guess what? He's not gonna get his money back. Does that make sense? So that's what Hamilton saw that as the important part about debt. The other thing that Hamilton was in favor of, he was in favor of tariff taxes and duties on whiskey. Hamilton also was a fan of the National Bank and wanted states to control money. Jefferson wanted states to control money. Hamilton ends up winning out. He says, no, we don't want to have states controlling money. Hamilton feels that the federal government should control it. And so the first national bank from 1791 to 1811 is in Philadelphia.
From 17 what?
91 to 1811. It's in Philadelphia. All right. Let's talk a little bit about this again, all under this first executive. The first executives that we have here, all part of George Washington and Mr. Adams, of course, right? Let's talk about some of the divisions here amongst these cabinet members that included the loose versus strict constructionism. Loose versus strict constructionists. Remember, Hamilton is a loose constructionist. He believes that the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution grants the authority for the federal government to do many things to help carry out their day-to-day tasks. Jefferson, on the other hand, is a very strict constructionist, which means that in his interpretation of the Constitution, you can't do it as a federal government unless the Constitution says you can do it or may do it. Does that make sense to everybody? So we still see this today, this debate of a strict versus a loose constructionist, all right? And this rift between Hamilton and Jefferson ends up causing the first political parties. Also, during the first executive run here, we have the Whiskey Rebellion. Which took place during George Washington's second or first? What's the year for a Whiskey Rebellion? 94. So second term in office. Again, people were mad with the excise taxes. And why is the Whiskey Rebellion important? Anybody know? Washington sends thousands of troops in to squash the rebellion, and it demonstrates the power of the federal authority, yes. All right? Good job. Greg, thank you for demonstrating how you should be answering a question.
Yeah, I don't raise my hand, that's the weird thing.
Threw me off there. All right. Last thing here. Actually, not the last thing, but getting there. The Washington farewell. Washington's farewell from his. Remember, he decides not to run for a third term, which is a precedent that is set, and was broken by Teddy Roosevelt, and then FDR ends up going for a third term and a fourth. It was still considered a faux pas, right? You're breaking that 8-year barrier, third term. I know what you're saying, Jack. I know what you're saying, but all right. So in Washington's farewell address, he brings up a couple of important points here. The first thing that he talks about is he tells everybody that, hey, listen, you need to make sure that you maintain unity as a nation. He felt that the nation needed to make sure that despite all of the discord that prevailed between different religions, groups, and classes, that we remained united as a people. He also was in favor of supporting and obeying the Constitution. He warned about the dangers of political parties. And you guys know what that sign means? It means the same as the line above, right? Danger of any type of foreign alliances, all right? Permanent alliances he was not a fan of. He would not like the United Nations, all right? Yeah, I suppose it is, John. I suppose it is. All right. Let's continue on here. Again, still talking about the first executives. Next thing I want to bring up here, so this is Washington primarily, right, talking about his farewell address. Now we have Mr. John Adams takes over, and perhaps the most important thing you have to know about the Adams presidency, besides the XYZ affair, is the Alien and Sedition Act. Adams oversteps his power of the president during these acts and punishes Democratic Republicans. Basically, people could receive any type of prison time for essentially just saying something that was against the government, or that went against the government. Remember, during this time, there is the debate here between the French Revolution that's taking place. We've got the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, or better known, the Democratic Republicans, right? That's what they become known as when Jefferson is running. The Democratic Republicans are in favor of the French Revolution, right? The Federalists are not. Why is that? What's that? Okay, but why? What is it about? Because initially, Hamilton is okay with the French Revolution, but what changes their tune? Does anybody, Laura Lee, do you remember what changes their tune? Federalists were traditionally what type of individual? Wealthy individuals, right? They were traditionally wealthy individuals. And so as a result of that, when they saw all of those beheadings in France from the lower class taking out the aristocracy, they got a little nervous. All right? And so that's why they became more pro-British, especially in matters between the two sides.
And so, like, massacres and, like, beheadings even turned, like, Democratic Republicans against it.
Yeah, it got a little bit too bloody for them, right? I think, and I remember your textbook talking about that, maybe like chapter 10 or 11 talks about that. But still, traditionally, they were more pro-French. The Federalists were more pro-British. And so we had the Alien and Sedition Act taking place here, talking for any kind of libel, L-I-B-E-L, or talking bad could end you up in the slammer. All right? Now, one of the important aspects or outcomes of the Alien and Sedition Act here is the response by the states, particularly in Virginia, where we've got James Madison, right? And in Kentucky, they're kind of coached up by Mr. Thomas Jefferson. They pass what are essentially the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Who can tell me what the Virginia and Kentucky resolution? Danny.
It basically nullified any laws that states couldn't seem were.
Yeah, what's this called? What kind of theory is this? Craig? Starts with a C. Craig? Compact theory, you bet. Meaning, and your book does a good job of, Fast Track to Fight does a good job of spelling this out. But basically, it means, hey, look, if the states make up the union, and the union is comprised, therefore, of all the states saying, hey, you can govern over us, and if that federal government does something bad because it's created by the state, each state has the authority to say, no, we're not going to follow this law. All right? All right, and then of course, this sets up the states and federal government conflict, all right, which will carry on for, well, even still today, there's still some division here, right? But the answer to who has supremacy is decided when? Civil War, right? In the 1860s, all right? All right. So Adams has a rough go of it, and we have the Jefferson Revolution in 1800. Jefferson, he's more of an agrarian-based guy, right? Somebody going to talk to let him know that it's okay. He's agrarian.
No, it's not.
No, we won't do that today. That's just mean. That's just mean. He's also favored a limitations on government's power, so he was a strict constructionist. All right. And I'll get into some more of that a little bit later. We all good here?
Swell, Mr. Rose.
Dandy. That's dandy.
Get it? Dandy.
All right. So this is the first executives right here. Let's talk a little bit about number 2 here, which is the early judicial department here, which is the Supreme Court. So call this strengthening the Supreme Court. And remember, John Jay was the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. He retires because, oh, it's too boring. 6 weeks, that's all we get. That's all he wanted to do, I guess, for work. They kind of set their own schedule. And Marshall takes over, Justice Marshall. He, of course, is a he's a cousin to Thomas Jefferson, my cousin. And some of the more famous court cases that we have here that kind of strengthen the role of the Supreme Court in the early process here of our new Constitution. We got Marbury versus Madison. Remember, there's the writ of certiorari, whatever it is. Basically, this is actually a case that goes against the, it kind of favors the opposite political party of Marshall, but ends up, in the long run, helping to strengthen and improve the overall power of the federal government, all right? Especially the Supreme Court to determine whether or not something is or is not constitutional. And that, of course, is called what class? Judicial review. All right. Another important one was Martin versus Hunter. Hunter's Leslie, is that right? That was in 1816. This establishes the supremacy of the federal courts over state courts. Federal courts are supreme over state courts. There's McCulloch, versus Maryland. That's in 1819. This of course, the court rules that the government possessed the implied power to create a national bank, and that states could not tax those banks. And then another one here is Cohen's v. Virginia, which was in 1821. This is an important case because essentially the Supreme Court decides that they can review a decision from a state Supreme Court. In issues dealing with the authority of the federal government. So, all right. All right. See how far I want to go here today. All right, let's talk about early foreign policy. Yes, John. All right. You guys getting kind of fatigued here? It's Friday.
Man.
Who's all going to do volunteer day today? Cool. Awesome.
Is it Chapter 6 now?
No. This will still touch up on chapter. It might be a little bit of chapter 6, but not all of it. Did I tell you guys to read chapter 6 for today too, or no? No? Alright. I said to read chapter 5, I thought.
Yeah, you said 5.
Yeah. Alright, that's good. Let's talk about early foreign policy. First thing I want to put up here is the Pinckney trick. I always call it the Pickney, even though I know it's not how it's pronounced, but that's how I pronounce it. But don't forget the other N in there, okay? This treaty right here, the Pinckney Treaty. This was in 1795. All right. This treaty was basically, it was between Spain and the U.S. They had settled the Florida boundary with the U.S. and allowed the U.S. to utilize New Orleans tax-free. They were afraid that as our relationship was appearing to get better with Great Britain, that was going to cause them some issues. And so they wanted to play nice with us. There's the Barbary Pirates. Arr! Which of course started in Jefferson's second term. And I don't believe, when is it finally resolved? Is it 1815 or 1815, is that right? This is essentially where we have bribes paid to Tripoli African pirates, all right? Tripoli? Tripoli! No, it's Tripoli. This is a pretty big blunder here. There's the Navy, right, that we don't have, that was supposed to protect these people. And so we end up kind of negotiating with terrorists, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't know. And end up... yeah, we gave money until we got our Navy, and then we went over there and went America on them. America. All right? There's also the Louisiana Purchase. Louisiana fans. Louisiana Purchase. Oh, Purchase. This took place in what year? 1803. Very good, boys and girls. Very good. I've taught you well. And you have, let's see, basically what we were looking for is we wanted to make sure that with Napoleon dominating everything over in Europe there and gaining lands back in the New World, we wanted to try to work out a deal where we could make sure that we had access to New Orleans. And so Jefferson sends these guys over to purchase just the New Orleans port. He says we can spend up to, I think it was $10 million. And during this time, Napoleon, he ends up losing Haiti. He lost out on his empire because he didn't have that connection, right? There's the famous... so Napoleon loses Haiti. There's the Toussaint Louverture, right? You guys remember him? Toussaint, there we go. was the guy who led that rebellion in Haiti. And so because Napoleon feels like he can't keep Haiti, he thinks, oh crap, I'm not even gonna have a chance here of holding on to my entire empire. He wasn't interested in it, so he sold the entire thing for $15 million, and which is essentially, this does a couple of things. Number one, this is for 3 cents an acre. We double the size of the U.S., okay? Now, here's the issue with the Louisiana Purchase. It comes with a little bit of a constitutional conflict, and this is where I feel the weasel comes into play, all right? Remember talking about the weasel? What type of constructionist was Thomas Jefferson? Very strict, right? If it's not said in that Constitution, we can't do it. All right? Anything in the Constitution say anything about, is there any lines, in the Constitution that says anything about a president being allowed to purchase land or territory? No, it doesn't, right? And so a lot of Jefferson critics will view this as a very hypocritical thing for him to do. In fact, there's a lot of things that your book talks about. The Fast Track to 5 mentions that Jefferson does or doesn't do that kind of make him out to be maybe not quite as different as he would like to be from Alexander Hamilton, all right?
Wasn't there, like, he thought about passing an amendment, but it would have taken too long?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very easy to criticize people, too, that are in that position. Like, I don't think he had any idea that he was going to be purchasing that entire vast land. But my question is, why did he need a constitutional amendment to buy a $15 million big swath of land, but not think about a constitutional amendment to pay $10 million for Louisiana, or for just New Orleans? And I don't know if that $10 million, again, it could depend. If he was looking to acquire land, well, is that in the Constitution he could do it to begin with? Or if he was looking simply to use and occupy New Orleans, but even at that, does the president have the power to do that? I don't know. So this is where he gets hammered, because all those things he was on the soapbox for when he was running for president, or when he was criticizing the Federalists, he ends up kind of doing some of the things that he thought the government shouldn't be doing.
Could you just use the Ninth Amendment to the advantage and be like, I'm a citizen, so that I can do anything it doesn't say can't do here, so I can buy this?
Oh, if you as a private citizen could he have done it? Maybe, but as somebody who's using federal money, he didn't have 15 mil in his pockets. All right. All right. Let's talk about some more stuff here with Louisiana. We got to know about Lewis and Clark, who explored the west there up to the Pacific Northwest. Of course, Sacagawea helps them out. They helped to set off a wave of westward movement. The Louisiana Purchase also increases nationalism. Let's see. We've also got federal government power eventually shifts west. away from New England as a result of this. Yeah, Johnny.
If Lewis and Clark are with the Pacific Ocean, did we technically not own that at that time? So whose land was that?
I think that was that part of the debated area, like we had issues with Washington and Oregon, and there's like Russia.
Was that at that time yet or not?
I can't remember the time period. If you look in the opening of your textbook, they should talk about like where, like there's a map of the United States that shows where everything was acquired. I don't remember exactly. Sorry, man. I think they ended up in Washington though, right? Washington State, if I remember correctly.
Isn't that was around the time where they were the gold rush and they had to try to get everything from Mexico.
Once in a while.
No. When the disputed area of Oregon was kind of around that area, around the time of the gold rush.
I think what's important to know is that, John, I think what's important to note about that is, I think there's a lot of disputed area, and if they're just walking here, we don't have any maps of this area, right? So even if they go all the way to the Pacific, they might be going through area that we may not have even claimed, or we may have claimed, but somebody else may have claimed it, because there's not a whole lot of topographical satellite images that exactly show you where you're at, right? And so there's a lot of discussion about, that's why there were so many debates during that time, is because people, it was tough to be able to tell exactly where you were, all right? Question?
Just pretty much what it says, like, it was pretty easy, like, to determine where the western border of the U.S. and the eastern border of the Louisiana territory was, how they determined
Yeah.
the Louisiana territory.
Yeah. I don't know.
And it's kind of like, well, we'll just draw a line right here.
Yeah. So it should be this parallel. All right. Okay. Other important aspects here of early, that doesn't really answer your question very. The answer is I don't know. I'm not sure, and I wish I did. So I'm sorry. Last thing here I want to bring up about early foreign policy is the Monroe Doctrine. Which I think you guys will get to in Chapter 6, right? Basically, it's a follow-up to Washington's farewell address. When was the Monroe Doctrine? Jeez, why did Mr. Russ have us all memorize those key dates and figures? So I can ask you guys, right?
Well, Craig's got the open book right in front of him, so.
Oh, fair enough, too.
Open to Chapter 5.
All right, so basically, the Monroe Doctrine is that the U.S. will stay out of Europe, Europe will stay out of the Americas. There's these spheres of influence here. All right. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. I was going to talk about, we have 5 minutes left, I could talk about the causes of the War of 1812, but I want you guys to read about that first. And we're going to have a busy night on Sunday, okay?
So we'll be on section Chapter 6.
Yep, all right.